Hello, and welcome to Vendor Trash. Is the title a reference to my opinions, my drawing skills, or both? That's for you to decide. Player housing is just around the corner. While not a feature I particularly cared about that much, the aspect that has really sold me on it are the neighborhoods and the social element. Well, when the PTR first went up a few weeks ago, my friend group opened the gates to place dibs on what plots we wanted in our hood. And because I didn't want to be forever stuck with not my favorite lot, I did something that I've never done before, and actually downloaded the PTR and spent a buttload of time scouting out the very best plots. I have to say that the conversations it spawned with my friends were quite engaging. One thing that I quickly noticed while flying around the Horde neighborhood was that pretty much every plot had components about it that made it the best at something. I still had favorites, of course, but were we to be assigned plots randomly, I think I'd be happy with almost any space given to me, which goes to show just how well designed the neighborhood was. There weren't really any stinker plots, and even picking my favorite was a tall order. I then went over to the Alliance neighborhood and concluded that it was way less interesting or diverse. I'm being slightly hyperbolic, of course, but I definitely wound up feeling like a lot of the plots were samey. But I was determined to prove myself wrong, and furthermore, to maybe help you, the viewer, decide what plot you want to snatch up come December. So I gave myself a challenge and surveyed all 55 plots, trying to find something about each of them that makes them special. This week we'll cover Founders Point, and next week, Razorwind Shores. Now, one major difference between the two neighborhoods is that Founders Point is much more cleanly divided into its respective biomes, or areas, or districts, or boroughs, or what have you. You have the Elwyn Forest-inspired central region around the town center, which seems to just get called Founders Point. To the west, you have the coastal region that's almost reminiscent of Stormsong Valley, called the Outer Banks. To the south, you have the Gilded Oaks, which is somewhat inspired by Westfall, but is much less wheat farms and more golden forest. And to the southeast, you have Broomwood Hollow, the Duskwood-esque area. These are your four major boroughs, but there are also two smaller ones. Nestled between Little Elwyn and Outer Banks is the actual farmland called Mears Farm. And to the northeast, we have a somewhat mountainous area called Stonevale Ridge. Now then, allow me to be your realtor as we examine each plot in turn. Note that the numbering of the plots is fairly random and will be moving mostly geographically, so the numbers will be jumping around quite a bit. Let's start things off in the Elwyn area. Plot 46 feels like the idyllic Elwyn plot. You're in the heart of the forest with a scenic short waterfall nearby and a nice stream right next to your property. You can see mountains off in the distance and even the portal to Stormwind, but all of it still feels distant thanks to the tree cover. The only potential downsides here are that your two neighbors, 49 and 54, feel absurdly close by. Some breathing room would have been nice. Plot 49 puts you right near plots 46 and 53. You've forgone water access for more immediate road access. It's also relatively spacious. Honestly, I'm having trouble finding something that elevates this one above those other two. It has a felled tree next to it if you like that, and is more visible to those traveling by. So if you want to show off, it is the best of the three. Plot 54 has a couple of things going for it. If you don't mind being literal feet away from plot 46, you get to enjoy the same waterfall. You're also right up against this small hill that is basically the only thing separating you from the town center. Yep, you're the very closest plot to it. The positioning feels a bit more enclosed than 46, so you may enjoy a greater sense of security as well. Plot 16 is more generic forest greenery. You've got one close neighbor in plot 11, but nobody else around for quite a ways. Though the town center is fairly nearby as well, I'd say this plot's main selling point are the tree and stump with a bush in it and mushrooms around it that sort of frame the entrance to your plot. Plot 11 is the perfect one if you want to live in fake Elwyn while having fake Duskwood literally right across the stream from you. Your only close neighbor is plot 16, though plot 15 is fairly close across the stream. But yeah, the plot for the Duskwood-loving Elwyn dweller. Plot number 48 is an absolute banger. It's firmly in the Elwyn-inspired district with greenery all around you, with a river on one side of your property. A river that leads to a sizable waterfall because, oh yeah, you're on top of this cliff. A cliff which affords you a great view of both Gilded Oaks and the Outer Banks, as well as the Crescent Cove between them. It almost feels like you own the cove. The only caveat, which can be a plus or minus depending on your preferences, is that you're in very close proximity to plot 54, to the point that it isn't obvious by default where the fence line should be. Plot 53 has a lot of the same allure as Plot 48, just somewhat inferior in every way. You're still up on the cliff and in the Elwyn area, with a view of Crescent Cove and the surrounding area, but your position feels a bit bullied out of the way by your neighbor here. One upside, though, is that you're right on the border with Gilded Oaks, so if you want a cliff-top plot while still feeling somewhat in tune with autumn, you may prefer this one. There's also a big tree with mushrooms on it nearby, if that's your jam. Plot 51 has a very nice stream next to it, complete with its own little dock. Your only real close neighbor is 47 across the road, though 45 isn't too far off either. I'd say that if Plot 46 appealed to you, but you don't want a neighbor literally right on your butt, this is probably the best lot for you. Plot 47 is just across the path from 51, and just across the stream it shares with 46. It's very close to the town center, but I feel like its main advantage is that of the Elwyn-inspired plots, it seems to be the most spacious. So, if you have a large construction project or simply want a lot of elbow room while being in the forest, consider Plot 47. Plot number 7 is in a cluster of 4 close houses with 9, 27, and 44. Though unlike some other clusters around, your property line is pretty clearly framed by the geography. A river and the nearby waterfall behind you, a short ledge to your right, a felled tree to your left, and these stairs to the front, which is honestly the plot's biggest selling point. You have stairs leading right up to your cornerstone, which only one other plot has. If you want stairs, definitely consider this one. Plot number 27 is in the same cluster, being up against the mountains. It has access to the same stream as Plot 7, though not as cleanly, but to make up for it, you have a pond to your left. Probably the most distinct element to this plot is the log tunnel out front, which is actually positioned well enough that you could treat it as the entrance to your house, or at least your property, depending on how you handle your plot's exterior. Neat. Plot 9 is the one in this cluster closest to the main road, and honestly has the least to offer. It has no water access and is mostly just surrounded by trees. But if lush green trees and being the face of your little area is what you want, then this may be a good plot for you. Plot 44 feels less gimmicky than Plots 7 and 27, the latter of which it shares a pond with. It's simply a nice green space with the mountains as a backdrop, which includes a way for you to climb up the mountains without needing to fly, so there's that if you care about it. Plot number 42 almost feels like a loner plot, being the only one in the western section near the town center that isn't in that cluster of 4. But it's not completely isolated, as there's a very spacious clearing that connects it and Plot 44, making it the secret 5th plot of that bunch, in a sense. Having said all that, the main selling point here would be the curved path leading to your front yard. Oh, and you also get a log tunnel nearby. Plot number 39 feels very, very unique. It's pretty much right next to the entry gate to the Mears Farm area of Founders Point. That means you're right next to the fields and right across the road from the vineyards. And most notably, right next to this big barn. Have you always wanted your house right next to a big barn? I certainly haven't, but if you do, no other plot is even worth considering. Plot 45. Technically, the path leading up to your house is outside the gate to the farmlands, but if you walk down the steps, you're pretty much there, with the forest on your backside. Did I mention the stairs? Yep. Just like Plot 7, you have your own stairs leading up to your property, with a bench down near the bottom. If you're in a toss-up between the two, well, do you want to be near a river or fields? Your call. Plot 34 is the last of the 3 farmland plots, and of the 3 has the distinction of a clear view of Outer Banks, as well as your own private gazebo. Not much else to say here. If you want farm property, you've only got 3 to choose from, so it shouldn't be a tough call. Plot number 52 feels like the entrance plot to the Outer Banks, trying to squeeze juice out of both Elwyn and beach elements, and it has fairly close access to a subtle path up the cliff rocks. If you like the beach but don't want to live on the beach, consider 52. Plot 50 is the Outer Banks plot that is both completely grassy and completely open, giving you lots of freedom with what you want to do, or freedom to do nothing if you just like the space. You're fairly close neighbors with both Plots 52 and 19. Plot 19 is still completely grassy, but with far more immediate access to the shallow water, including your own private gazebo. You're also, in a sense, flanked by bridges and the plot with the closest access to the island that has no plots whatsoever on it. Plot 29 feels like the most sheltered of the Outer Banks plots, with you having to travel slightly downward to access it. You've got a hill on one side and shallow water with a dock and rocky outcroppings on the other side, as well as a bridge to look under. Plot 4 is Plot 29's backyard neighbor, in a sense, as they both have their own dock on the opposite side of that area of shallow water. However, 4 has quite a few more obvious neighbors, as there are a lot of plots out here. So, if you like what 29 has to offer, but want to be more social and near the ocean, 4 may be for you. Plot number 12 is probably what I would consider the one most out by the coast, even if the property itself is fairly grassy. It also has closest access to that unused island from the other side, as well as close access to that set of stairs and deck. Plot 25 is also in this big cluster, but feels a bit more centralized. I feel like it has even more of a legitimate claim to those stairs and platform though, as well as that dock out by the water. If you like the coast and are a greedy person, maybe settle in 25. Plot 40. Shockingly, despite there being an abundance of homes in the Outer Banks, this one is the only one that has you building on actual sand instead of grass. And so, while it isn't the absolute closest to water, it does feel the most beach-like. Plot number 28 lies atop a small mound that overlooks the cluster of 4 plots southwest of it, so you can feel superior. Plus, access on the other side is only across a bridge. But really, by a country mile, the most standout element here is the incredibly long set of stairs down to the dock on the beach. Nobody else can claim this dock. It's clearly yours, so long as you chose to claim the plot itself. Plot 43 is pretty much the same elevation, but is more inland and doesn't have anything nearly so boisterous to lay claim to. It is closer to the cliffside if that appeals to you, and you can drop down on plots 29 and 24 whenever you want. Plot 24 is easily the most isolated of the Outer Banks. Even access to its closest neighbor requires traversing a narrow path near the cliff. And its positioning means you can kind of claim the entire Northwest Peninsula here as your own. This is the perfect plot for someone who wants to be by the beach, but not by other people. Plot 13 is the plot for someone who loves apples, as you're situated next to an apple orchard. And whoever was building here on the PTR clearly loved apples because they added more trees to their yard. Trust me, there aren't that many here by default. You also share a small pond with plots number 5 and 30, complete with an apple bobbing barrel. It's also a coastal plot with a high cliff to one side, so you feel at least a little tucked in. Plot number 30 lies slightly inland from number 5, and essentially shares a log tunnel and that pond with a dock with it. On its other sides feature a small garden, silo, and building of sorts complete with a cellar that you can enter. If you like that log but prefer the woods or a view of the coast, or just really want a neighbor's cellar, you're golden. Personally though, it feels a bit like I'm just occupying someone else's space. Plot 5 occupies an area in between the coast, complete with its own little mill, and this nice log tunnel with mushrooms growing on it that leads to the pond. Unfortunately, the log isn't really lined up properly, so it's not exactly a useful feature, but still. Plot 14 is great if you love apples, since you've got several apple trees nearby and an apple orchard immediately next to your property, but don't love apples so much that you want to live in the orchard. You'll be very close friends with plot number 36, and while your location isn't as noteworthy, you share a lot of the same idyllic view of the Outer Banks. Plot 36 is great if you love apple trees, but less so than plots 13 and 14. Also, this plot is in very close proximity to 14, so if you're real good buds with them, this may be for you. Between the two, this one is a bit more distinct as it lies on the tip of the land near the shore. Plot 35's claim to fame is obvious. It's the closest one to the Big Dang Lighthouse. Granted, you aren't right next to it, so it won't feel like it's yours. There's even an NPC house nearer to it than you, but it's not too far off. You also have a flight point right next to you and very quick access to the beach. Plot number 1 is a fairly unassuming little one that'll be very close neighbors with number 26. That being said, if you want a Golden Forest vibe with a nice private pond, but don't want to associate with apples or the coast, this is the best option for you. Plot 26 is the best plot for someone who wishes to live in Golden Oaks and feel like they're near civilization. In addition to plot 1 in their backyard and 37 across the road, You're surrounded on most sides by a cobblestone path and are quite near a tiny ring surrounding a gazebo, as well as a water wheel next to the river that separates you from Broomwood Hollow. Plot 37 is a fairly open one near the coast, with only Plot 26 as a neighbor. While unquestionably part of the Gilded Oaks, you're the closest such lot to the river separating you from Broomwood, along with the accompanying bridge and waterfall. If you want to soak in both districts' aesthetics but are more partial to the golden colors, this is the best plot for you. Plot 31 is the first of the 5 mountain plots, though they feel more mountain adjacent than anything. This one is the closest to the Elwyn assets if you want that to be the bulk of your scenery, but the main draw here is the nearby stream and the bridge crossing it that you can go under to reach the waterfalls. And on the other side, you have a fairly open slope populated by sheep. Plot 23 is nestled against the mountains with griffins flying nearby. Aside from being near the bridge and waterfalls, it has its own little fun path leading high up to your own private pond atop the falls. And another pond atop another set of falls. If private ponds in the mountains, or mountain climbing in general, are your thing, scoop up number 23. Plot number 32 is also great for mountain climbing, as it also has a way up the mountains a little bit. This plot can also boast being the highest one in Founders Point, so it's easy to feel superior here. The main drawback is that there really isn't spare space around your actual plot, so it can feel a bit cramped. A fair trade-off though. Plot 22 is, sadly, only the second highest plot in Founders Point. Unless you want to count the watchtower situated here, which is basically yours because who else could claim it? Then you absolutely are the highest. And generally speaking, this is the plot in Stonevale Ridge, which has the best view overlooking Broomwood Hollow. Plot number 3 is perhaps the most unassuming of the 5 Stonevale plots, but it has its special components. It's the most centralized of them, which makes it feel like the beating heart of the area. And aside from access to the stream and proximity to the district gate, it boasts the best split view of both Broomwood Hollow and the Elwyn area. If you've read any sort of discussion about favorite plots, then Plot 0 requires no introduction. Aside from an incredibly easy number to remember, this plot has a ton going on for it. Its own little dock, and close proximity to this neat little island that has a tree populated by fireflies. And on the other end, you have a path leading down to your own private waterfall. And honestly, a pretty decent view of the Elwyn area, even if it is darkened. This plot's almost too busy for me, but it's easy to see why others would adore it. Plot 17 is Zero's far humbler neighbor, but it's not a bad plot by any means. You have even easier access to that neat island with the firefly tree, and though you don't have the waterfall access, you are more entrenched into Broomwood itself, which many players may prefer. It'd be tempting to call Plot 15 the inverse of Plot 11, as it's a Duskwood plot right next to Elwyn, but honestly, the screen effects make it very difficult to appreciate the Elwyn elements. That's not to say this plot is bad though, quite the contrary, it has a ton of unique elements. The path leading down to it is incredibly long. In addition to the stream, you have your own private dock, and down the hill, you have relatively close access to the only moonwell in the zone, which might suck if you don't want a moonwell, but it is great otherwise. And aside from the aforementioned Plot 11, you're incredibly isolated, despite not being on the edge of the map. Great plot. Plot 2 is the only one with more immediate access to that moonwell, as the path leading down to it is on your side. Unfortunately, even this one doesn't exactly have immediate proximity. Still, if you're channeling your inner night elf and don't mind the spooky vibes here, a great plot for you. Across from your front yard, you're also pretty near the spooky shipwreck-strewn coast. Plot 10 is the Broomwood property closest to the border with Gilded Oaks, although I think that's actually a bit of a disadvantage because the lighting in Broomwood just makes the oaks look kind of dull. Still, this plot is pretty close to the coast, with a waterfall to the west and a bunch of shipwrecks to the east. Plot number 8 is another coastal plot, and this one boasts a long path down the cliffside to the spooky shore below, complete with its own dock. If you want a coastal Broomwood plot and are big on the idea of presumed ownership, it's a great spot for you. Continuing along the coast, we have Plot 18, which manages to also snag some of the graveyard vibes, and it even has a watchtower in close vicinity. If you like the coast and the graveyard and don't want to have to choose, this plot is a great compromise. The last of our coastal Broomwood Hollow plots is number 41, and it has a lot going for it. It's the most southeastern plot and has access to 2 paths down to the beach below. One is kind of shared with Plot 8, but the more important one is all yours. It leads to Breakwater Bight, the Smuggler Cove that also houses the Tortollan Dive Bar. The plot itself is also fine, still plenty of spooky vibes, but very open if you want that. Have you ever wanted to live near a cemetery? Well, Plot 33 may be where you want to set up shop then, as the entrance to Morgan's plot is right across the road. There's more to this space though, as it is situated on top of a fairly open elevated mound, which is partially built up with an actual stone foundation. I don't think any other plot has that feature. A great area for anyone who is both spooky and distinguished. Have you ever wanted to live in a cemetery? Well then, Plot 20 is without a doubt the one for you. I'm actually shocked it's the only one in here because that's a feature I feel like more than 1 in 55 people might want for their home. But yeah, all of the free set dressing is sure to go a long way when establishing your home. The only letdown is that the crypts aren't actually something you can enter. Can't have everything, I suppose. Plot 38. This feels like a pretty average Broomwood plot, but that's not exactly an insult. The area is lightly framed by trees and has a nice log tunnel very nearby, and decently positioned. And if you drop down a bit, there's even a small little pond. Plot number 6 is phenomenal. It has all of the spooky forest vibes you want out of Broomwood Hollow, and has the best access to this eerie pond. And the stream connecting to it, but more importantly, the pond. You just know someone was murdered there. And the best part is that the pond manages to create a misty effect that only this one and Plot 21 have to them. Honestly, if and when I get an Alliance home, this is my current frontrunner. Since it's my secondary house, I'm okay leaning into a less generic, spooky vibe, so Broomwood Hollow is definitely my borough of choice. And I don't want a coastal plot or one that borders another borough too closely, so that narrows things down a fair bit. Some place that a witch in the dark forest would live in is exactly the vibe I want, and this plot is one of the best for that, with some specific flares that make it extra appealing to me. And lastly, Plot number 21 is definitely one of the more isolated ones, sort of being uphill and the easternmost plot in Broomwood Hollow. Plot number 6 is the only one that could claim to be their neighbor, but they aren't exactly bumping elbows. There's a nice stream here which creates the aforementioned mist that this plot and Plot 6 benefit from. What's more is that you can, without flying, make your way up the hills a short distance to what appears to be the source of this water that flows down into the rest of the hollow. Surprise, we're not actually completely done yet, because scattered around Founders Point, there are a few areas with construction sites set up that look like they hold fairly high potential for future housing plots. And there aren't too many of them, so I figured I might as well run through them really quick. Bonus plot number 1. This would be the second best one overall for access to the lighthouse, while planting you a bit closer to civilization. Bonus plot number 2. There's a very fitting space over in Broomwood Hollow that appears to be under construction as well. It's fairly centrally located within the area, is properly spaced from other plots, and has much more direct access to the pond I mentioned for Plot 38. And bonus plot number 3. I'm less confident that this area may be intended for a future plot, but this island by Crescent Cove isn't serving much purpose otherwise. If converted, you'd have your own gazebo, as well as a watchtower and a sizable dock. And, just the entire island. And that's all of them. Having done this exercise, I certainly have more appreciation for Founders Point and its plots than I did previously. I still have my gripes, as I feel that far too much of the area is just different varieties of forest, and that far too many plots are stepping on each other's toes. But there's still a lot to love, and I look forward to spending more time here, even though Razorwind Shores is better. This week's shrine may seem like a bit of an odd choice because why wouldn't I draw Founders Point? And simply put, I want to save that for a future video where I potentially want it more. So I was trying to think of the zones that inspired Founders Point. I already used Elwyn. I could maybe do Westfall, but then I'd have to draw like Edwin Van Cleef or Vanessa Van Cleef. I suppose with Duskwood I'd have Stitches. So I started getting a little loose with my criteria. And you know what zone in the game is similarly spooky to Duskwood? Gilneas. I mean, technically I already drew Gilneas City with Gen, but I'm counting that as a separate thing. And Gilneas, specifically the Blackwalled, known in Hearthstone as the Witchwood, is absolutely a vibe I can get behind. Gilneas is one of my favorite Cataclysm zones, and given the option, I'd probably use a lot of Gilnean assets when setting up my Alliance home. And the most fitting character remaining is who is technically the leader of the Worgen, former princess, now queen, Tess Greymane, who is quite notably not a Worgen. The Worgen Heritage quest literally had her wanting to become one and deciding by the end of it that she didn't need to, which, hey, maybe that's cool for her individual character, but I think Worgen players want, you know, a Worgen leading them, and just more Worgen representation in general. So I said, screw it, we're making Tess a Worgen. Unfortunately, because thus far Tess has remained a fairly unimportant character, she doesn't have much going in the way of a unique design. In fact, that aforementioned Hearthstone expansion probably did the best job of giving us such a thing, with them really leaning into a witch hunter sort of vibe. Well, a subtlety rogue witch hunter, I guess, which was a little difficult for me to emulate, but the Hearthstone art is definitely what I tried to draw the most inspiration from. But about Tess's character, there's honestly not much at all to say. She's had very little to do. Like, especially if you haven't done the Legion Rogue campaign or the Worgen Heritage quest, her being named as queen at the end of Dragonflight had to seem super random. I mean, it's poorly set up even with that context. So she's probably a fine character, there's just not really anything to base that claim on. I also find it hilarious how Gen tried to set Anduin up with his daughter, and that a lot of our peers endorse this as a way of uniting the kingdoms as if this was Game of Thrones. It did kind of seem like in BFA, Blizz was actually trying to set Anduin up with Talia, and of course there's always Rathian and potentially even Faerun, although I prefer thinking of both of those as close friendships. So if I were in Anduin's shoes, I actually would try to pursue Tess above those other options, with the caveat that she has to take on the Worgen Curse. For reasons. Don't judge me. I have absolutely no idea how I've spent this long talking about a nothing character like Tess, or about Anduin's freaking love life. Let's end this video now. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you next week. Bye-bye.